if I build it, they will come, I think. And that's a thought that, especially for first-time founders or those who might not have a sales or business development experience, it's a thought that we have in the back of our mind, focus on building the product, whatever the product is. It can be a service, or it can be something physical, or it can even be an app or a software. But then when it comes to the moment of launching, opening our doors, we go out and we wait anxiously for our clients, customers to come in the door, but they're not there. Why? Some of them didn't even know that you existed. And maybe, yes, your product could be the best, but if people don't know that it's out there, why would they even line up for you? Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Naily Makangu from Athena Leaders. People know me as the Mary Poppins of Startups. I bridge the gap between the business, the people with the ideas and want to create something, and the other side, the technology, so that we can translate and work better together. Now, in this show, I always encourage you to ask me questions. I love it when it's interactive, but don't worry. If you are not live now and you are listening to me afterward, find me on LinkedIn or whatever platform, DM me, and I'm more than happy to answer you, either live or, well, whichever way you want. Now, what we are going to look at in this show is something that is really core to not just what I do, but to building a business of any type. Whether whichever industry you are, you might think, oh yeah, but I'm in the food business, this is not going to apply to me. I'm in the music industry, or I'm in the software industry, or I'm in the whatever world you are. If you are building something and people don't know that you exist, by the time you get to the end of the build part, then you will have to start the other, I wouldn't say even harder, because every step of building a business is hard. You're going to start looking at a different stage, which is how to actually how to attract people to find out that you exist. So what I want to do in this episode is it's going to be very quick, very short, because I've got something exciting coming up for you. And then we're going to start at some of the main components. Why do people build first? What does build even mean? And how can I start looking at it differently? And for those who are anxious to find out about the good news, I will be doing a workshop. I've got a workshop coming up in a few weeks. And if you are interested, come to that workshop. It's about validating your product, going through all of the steps that I'm talking in here in more details. Bring on your own product, your test case scenarios, and I'll be more than happy to go in and give you more details. This workshop is going to be the first one that I'm going to be doing, but as I've already heard a lot of great news from the conferences I spoke at in Cornwall as part of Software Cornwall powered by Slush'd. This is a topic that a lot of people resonated with, and I'm also sharing this topic with a lot of accelerators. So if you are a startup or whatever kind and you really feel like this is for you, then join. If you want to find out more details, then DM me. We'll also put the link in the show notes. So first question that we look into is why? Why do people are tempted to build, right? Well, let ask you a question. When it comes to refitting your kitchen, would you just go in and start doing the kitchen without even going out and thinking about building and designing and what needs to come where, getting in maybe an architect, depending on whether you are completely changing everything over the layout and the likes? Now, when we are in the world of building products, especially software products, we sometimes have the temptation of jumping in and getting the architects and the builders in before we even know what we want to do. And how does it manifest itself? Well, very simply. If you think about the fact that when you're starting a business, you don't really know how it's going to go. You have an idea of someone's pains or your market, but you haven't validated it. You haven't spoken to enough people to understand whether what you have in mind is exactly what the problem that they have in mind. The other thing could be that you have the right problem in mind and you know it's a pain and you have an idea on how to solve it. But without talking to other people out there, you are guessing. You are putting something together, and when people start using it, they come back and tell you, oh, absolutely love what you're doing. It's solving my problem, but actually, I would like it to be this way in a little bit. So in the software world, in the service world, we don't have the hindsight to get the architects to build the right framework from the start. It's a guessing work. So the more time you spend developing a lot of things, whether it's a website, whether it's a web app, whether it's a platform, the more you do that in isolation, the worse it's going to be for you. And in fact, Especially, this is something that I love talking about as one of my cousins in the food industry. One thing I loved about how she's starting a business was to really go out even on Instagram and putting recipes, not just recipes, but her cooking something, while at the same time she was going low key and trying to do like selling food or cooking, like private chef, and so many things that she did. So as I've said before, the same mentality comes across many industries. And you might wonder, well, this is not rocket science. A lot of people know about this. But why? Why are we always tempted to go out there? If I can summarize a lot of the different root causes why people, or us in general, I put myself there. Those are mistakes I've made when I first started my own business, courses that I created without even launching. That's another story for another day. But the reason why we do it is our comfort zone. Running a business is hard, whether you are a first-time, second-time entrepreneur. But especially when you come from different background and sales and marketing is not your forte, the idea of just doing that part stresses you out. If you are introverted, just as I am, and especially if you are shy as well, the idea of putting yourself out there was daunting. When I started my business, I didn't even like social media, which I still don't, but appreciate and respect it because it's a way of promoting things. But I had a friend of mine who went to a coffee shop. He sat me down, didn't ask my permission, and not even my forgiveness afterward. He said, Nelly, go and buy a cup of coffee for us. I went to buy coffee, and when I came back, he opened an Instagram account for me and says, you need to start using Instagram, and you need to start using LinkedIn better. You have barely any followers. You need those as a tool for your business because you're more of a B2B. Now, other businesses, some platform won't work for them, but I can remember the nerves that I had. Honestly, I sat there looking at him, and the first few videos, go back to my YouTube channel and look at the first few videos, scroll as low as you can, and you can see the difference. Because I hated cameras. I don't even know if I like it now or tolerate it. But honestly, this happens to everybody. And going over this comfort zone is really, really hard. Now, imagine when you multiply it by different areas. For example, understanding, they say you need to go and ask for feedback, but who do you ask for feedback? You need to go out there. I challenged one of my startup clients to go from coffee shop to coffee shop, as their ideas was based on coffee shops, to go and ask certain questions about exhibiting some art in a coffee shop and see what the response will be. And that, even just that, the thought of doing that take us out of our comfort zone. Maybe we don't have the tools. We're not comfortable talking about ideas because usually we have the full picture. And how do you translate the full picture in a way that when you're talking to someone, you might not have built it? You want to get them to be excited about it, but you want them to come in the journey when you don't have all of that. So there's a lot of things that happens that's really mental, that we need to break apart, that we need to recognize in ourselves, so that we know that we are potentially the crush that will stop our business going forward, or that we are investing so much time building without spending the months and weeks that is needed for the world to know. And if you're still not convinced, think about the bigger companies. They have bigger budgets. Even Netflix, I was in New York and I was on Times Square, and I was laughing because Netflix, who's kind of, everybody knows Netflix, but they were still advertising some of their latest shows on Times Square. And one of my favorite one, I think, is Top Boy, and it was actually advertised there. And I thought, wow, you feel the need to advertise and let people know that new shows are coming out when everybody know about Netflix. If Netflix and Google and Amazon, even Apple, they spend a lot of money to do that, then why are we not doing it? Of course, we do not have the budget to go out, and put our posts in public forums like Times Square, but there are other ways we can do that. And if you are at the point where you're thinking, I feel nervous, but yes, I want to give it a go, then please sign up to my workshop so that we can talk. I'll try to keep the size as small as possible, so that whether it's even 2 or 3 people coming on the workshop, because I run them frequently, we can focus on your ideas. So think about that. You have my undivided attention and the support of others in the mastermind, so that we can, as you are learning and going through the workshops, you might also get ideas that are tailored just for you. Now, the second question I wanna look into, for those who sometimes maybe think that yes, I understand the benefits, but at the same time, it's really hard for me to think about doing it small. And why should I even do it? The why goes back to the blueprints and the engineering. Why you shouldn't build your product with validating, especially avoid bringing engineers early on, is because you are not sure exactly what you're going to build. Now we have tools such as no code that can help you put an idea together. But even then, I always say stop, going back to what is it I want to do and how can I do it very quickly without even using complicated no code techniques. Because the more you spend on the tools, trying to figure out how the tools work, the more you go back into the comfort zone of doing something that actually is fun. I'm not put up my hands up. I love using tools. It's fun. Yet at the same time, you are not letting others out there and you are not even speaking to the market. The other reason why I said that it's best to delay how you do, especially heavy engineering, is so that you can understand a little bit better what the problem and what the solution should look like. As a software engineer, one of the things that we do when we come on board, we need to think about the architecture, not just the lovely web page, the UI, the UX, but if you're going to have a database, what does it look like? If you're going to have different parts of the system talking to each other, what does it look like? If you're going to need some kind of integration, what does it look like? Everything costs money. And the more we build without understanding really well how things will fit together, we might end up over engineering or under engineering, or building something that we will need to rebuild later on. Now, to cut down the cost, it's better to have a clear idea, which of course, as a startup, might be a luxury depending on where you are. So that's why it's really important to understand exactly how can I really start talking to people about my idea before I spend a lot of time on engineers, and how can I use that small aspect of building small if I have to build something, so that I avoid spending a lot of time and money on something that will be wasted. And in fact, another reason why I would highly recommend you to think about this differently, especially if you are a non-technical founder, is that you might not know exactly what to watch out for if it's your first time working with engineers. There's always a bit of a translation of language going, which is why I bridge the gap between the business and the technology, because I can translate the language between them. I've had a client that comes to me and says, I want a dashboard to have X and Y features. And I ask why. What does it mean in your world? How do we do it? What kind of messages that you want? Even just a login screen can take you hours of discussions if you want it a certain way, and also if you want it to work differently based on the layer of security that you want. Most of the time we don't see that. We are used to beautiful platforms that we don't know the amount of work that goes in the background. So that's why it's important to have a slightly clear idea before you go on and start talking to engineers and bring them on board. Now, as I said before, if this is really resonating with you and you want to join us and you want to work with us, then please join us on our next workshop. We have the link there for you on the screen, and we're going to put that in the chat as well. And if we'll be more than happy to have you look at, obviously give you all the tools and the goodies. And we are also having our online platform updated for those who might not be able to attend and want to do it remotely. So do give us a ping to get the link for the online platform. But in the meantime, do join us so that we can go into your steps together. Now, one other thing to bear in mind is how not to validate, right? So if you want to validate your ideas, what are the main mistakes that I see? First will be wanting to create something so that you can go and have a finished product to show to someone. That's definitely one mistake, because by spending too much time creating, you are denying yourself of the pleasure of hearing the great feedback of your idea, and also of the validation that you will get from the others. The second one, your families and friends, they tend to love you and they will always give you positive feedback. Very few will give you constructive criticism, and sometimes when they do, you might actually disregard that because they are your family and friends. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? They give you good feedback, you put it aside as in maybe they don't even know what they're talking about. They give you criticism, you put it aside as What do they know anyway, right? So that's why you kind of need to find a way to go out there and start asking the right people. The other one, make sure that when you, especially if you are doing interviews and the likes, make sure that you are not leading, asking people questions to get the answers that you want, right? So if you already know what your platform is going to be about, especially at the early stage of the platform or of your new idea, or even a new iteration of your idea, think about how you can ask questions around what you are trying to do, especially at the beginning, so that you get people's ideas, not specifically about what you're talking about. And then as the interview goes in, you can go into specifics a bit, but you want to kind of give them the space to express themselves. Why? When we work with a team, especially when I start, with some startup, I help them with their creating the product, the initial product, the ideation phase, and then we have a team that I will manage as well, and depending on how we do the relationship. What tends to happen is that when you go in a room, whether you are on your own or with your team, it's really exciting. Coming up with ideas and building is really exciting, and because the energy is high, we fall in love with idea. We fall in love with it so much that we don't realize whether it's a good thing or not a good thing, and we fall in love with it, and that we're making assumptions. When we go out and start asking people questions, if we're not careful, we're bringing all our assumptions with us. What we want to do is to validate the assumption that we are making, letting other people tell us, talk towards the ideas. And the more information that you get, the more you can come and change your idea. Now, some people will say that, the big innovation came without ever talking to clients. You never know what connections that they had, what they did in the previous lives, how much money they have. So I would actually say do what is best for you, but do not close yourself off. So making sure that you go out there. And the last advice that I will share today on one of the last ones that I will share is this. Think a little bit about three key steps, which are idea, build, and test. And that is the loop we are going to focus a lot on in the workshop. There's just not enough time. Each one of them could be a separate episode in a podcast. Maybe, as I know that my wonderful marketing guru is probably listening to that, is actually starting drafting new ideas for the podcast now. But each of those ideas could be topics that we can really dive in together. How do you break every single thing that you want to do in iteration that doesn't take you a long time, that goes into idea, build, test? How do you change your mindset when you have an idea to focus on the risk and assumptions for the next phase, and the build phase? How do you change that from building something extremely extensive and doing something very quick that requires a little amount of money at the beginning and eventually increase, of course? And then how do you test based on success criteria that most people don't even think about? So if you want to know more about this idea, build, test, and how, if you have an idea, you want to break it down in different iteration of idea, build, test, then please feel free to DM me, and also sign up for the workshop or my online course that will come up soon enough. And so that you can either do it on your own based on step-by-step that I will share with you, or also we can do it as part of the workshop. But it's really important to start thinking about an iterative way of growing your ideas, starting from the very basic layer to the very few level of tools, to maybe no code, to maybe engineers. But there is a progression that goes into that, and always making sure that you're asking yourself, why am I doing this, and measuring the success as you go along. And now the best part. How do I use the strategy of idea, build, test to attract people? Every single time that you are testing something, you are actually testing it with humans, with people. You need to find those people in the first place. Even if it's the first idea, the first iteration, the seed of the idea that you are testing, you still need to ask yourself the question, where do I find the people to come and be interviewed? Where do I find the people to come and have a discussion or try a sample of this? By answering those questions, you are already putting yourself in the mindset of letting them know so that when you build it, they will come. That is why it's really important. It will really push you to start thinking differently in terms of platforms, whether you go on different groups, whether you do a crowdfunding, whether you call friends of friends. I said not to ask your friends directly, but their friends is fair game. So why not use some of those techniques to slowly let the world know that this is happening? That's on one side. On the other side, especially if, like me, you really didn't even know what to do with social media, you might look at my marketing look great, but I had a lot of help, to get it to look what it looked like now. And even before, when I was doing it myself, I used a system called Build in Public. If you're not really sure about how to promote yourself, then just be yourself and talk about what you're doing. Talk about your idea. Talk about the experiment that you've done and what the result that you've got. Thank the people that you've interviewed online so that people know who you connected with, and others might know that you did something. Write down or break down your ideas in different steps. And I've got some questions that I send out when I help those who are just starting their ideas to talk about it on social media. And those questions helps them to think about their businesses in different aspects. And now, no excuses. We have ChatGPT. Imagine if you answer all those questions, right? And if you have some kind of data that you've got from interviewing the first set of people, put that on ChatGPT. It crunch it up for you. That is your LinkedIn post, Instagram, and the likes. You have Canva, no excuse for not having pictures, and all can be done very, very quickly. So this is, again, another way of, even if you want to hide, of course, I know that there's a marketing strategy and so many layers on top of that, but this talk is really aimed at those who, at the very beginning, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur of whatever kind, building a tech startup or the likes, and you are struggling to put yourself out there. This is what I will do. As I said before, if you are interested and you really want to dive deep, remember that we are running a workshop where we are going to look at this. We are going to break everything together. And if you do come with your idea that you want to work with us, more than happy. I will bring my own case study that we work through. But I will make sure that we have time for those who want to kind of bring the seed of their ideas and use the power of the team and the brain of the Mary Poppins of Startups to kind of give you a few iterations that you can start on your way to implement the idea, build, test, validate your product so that when you build it, they will come. You would have tested your market and get positive feedback or whatever feedback that will help you to move forward. In the meantime, do remember, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.